God-given, and it's also...
It's never been...
Putting the squeeze, they make money on...
Excessive materialism and militarism. We know full well that racism is still that hound of hell.
Well, let me know when you figure out how to get them to stop doing that.
I haven't. I just stopped talking to a lot of people because of that. I'm just like, stupid.
Yeah. I think that's the answer.
That is the answer. So what else, what kind of bars did you like going to?
When I lived in Williamsburg, you know, I've never been that guy who had like the bar, like a regular place. So I would just pop around. I actually felt kind of out of place in Williamsburg.
Yeah, Williamsburg is crazy white.
Yeah, it's the definition of hipster, which is interesting because when you live outside the city or you're not from like New York or wherever, hipster has like a different meaning. Hipster is like young, like, I don't know, 27-year-old kid who like in between skater and hippie. But when you get to Williamsburg, a hipster is like a 35, 40-year-old, like parents have money, dressed and all. It's deeper.
It is deeper.
It's deeper than a fucking 21-year-old kid.
Because I used to host a lot of couch surfers here, and
Yikes.
they would be, did you just say yikes?
Yeah. I could not let a stranger.
Why? You
Never.
meet so many people. I've met a lot of really cool people. We still keep in touch and stuff like that. I love how you just said yikes.
I couldn't have a stranger sleep on my couch and be able to sleep in my room.
Well, I made the point of trying to host women mostly, or like groups of friends, like groups as in like 3 girlfriends or something, or or couples. So sometimes I would host couples.
So you had a strategy.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Because the few times I hosted a single male, it was always not a good time. It was just like always a little awkward, and they're always just like, where's Garrett? Where? Because we were long distance at the time, and I'd be like,
how did they know who Garrett was?
Well, I'd have like pictures. Oh, I thought I had pictures of him. Well, I would say I have a boyfriend.
So where is he?
I don't know what I was. Oh yeah, I used to host a lot of couch surfers, and they would be super into the idea of going to like Bushwick and Williamsburg. They came here for that sole purpose.
Was a couch surfer back then considered someone today who would get an Airbnb, or like what makes you a couch surfer?
You don't pay for it. It's a hospitality exchange. So, like for example, I hosted a couple from Denmark, and I went to Iceland, and they happened to be woofing in Iceland. It's like World Organization Agriculture. It stands for something. Basically, you go to a farm, and in exchange for working there, you get free room and board. So they were woofing there, and
it sounds like a one-sided deal.
No, like because you get free room and board and food and stuff like that.
Okay. I guess if you don't have a house.
Yeah, so they lived in like a tiny cottage next to the farm in Iceland, and I got to stay there for free because they stayed with me for free in New York.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. So it's great. You meet so many cool people, and like I'm of the mindset that if you travel, you should travel to be an ambassador and not travel just to be a tourist. I mean, you can do either. Do whatever you want with your life.
An ambassador of your own?
Of your country. So because if I go as an American, or I don't know, no one thinks I'm an American, but if I go, they can then see not all of us are fucking crazy.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah. So I do the same thing with couch surfing. Like you learn a lot about different cultures and different people, and it's great.
They have to be from out of town. You're not going to just have like some guy who doesn't have an apartment in New York that needs a couch.
No. I vet all of my couch surfers.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, to each their own, I guess. That's the saying. It's a generous thing for you to do.
Yes. Are you ready?
I think.
Well, I am bad at intros, but welcome to Now in Color, the podcast that brings those who have been erased in history back to the forefront. I'm your host, Sandie Chang, and today I'm joined by...
Ezra Bynum.
Yeah? Oh, I wrote down a bio, too, if you want me to read it.
Please, go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, because Ezra sent me one, but then whatever. So I'm going to cut this out. Ezra is an actor and producer with credits in film, television, and theater. He grew up in a mixed-race family in the woods of Massachusetts and has now been in New York City for the past 5 years. We personally met in an acting conservatory.
Yes.
And I told him that I wasn't being cold or antisocial. I was just having an out-of-body experience because I was having anxiety attacks daily. God. And now we're friends.
Now we're friends.
So welcome, Ezra.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Now that you sparked my memory of the first time we met, yeah. That was actually, I would say that's a bonding moment, though.
That was a bonding moment.
That was, yeah.
Because I felt like I was just always sitting in a corner being kind of like antisocial. And I was just like, I feel like people don't quite know who I am. But it's literally because I'm having an out-of-body experience.
Well, you got over it, I think.
Yeah.
Or at least you confronted it.
I confronted it.
Yeah, but
yeah,
here we are. Now we're friends. And I'm happy to be here. I'm actually not only proud of what you do, but I'm a fan of it. I think it's really cool. The intro song and the name Now in Color and the icon, it's good. It's good.
Yay, thanks. Absolutely. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but I'm here now. And yeah. That's pretty much, I don't know, I'm very bad at taking compliments. I'm just like, okay, yeah. It's a defense mechanism. It's a thing.
Yeah?
Yeah, of like not wanting attention on me. So I always put it on other people.
Might not be the worst thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I need to give myself more credit, but I'm bad at that.
True.
Yeah.
You got to give yourself credit. I had someone tell me, a therapist.
Yes, I love therapy.
What did they say? They asked me, I guess the gist of it was there's a difference between being hard on yourself and holding yourself to high standards. And I always felt like I had to be hard on myself because I expected a lot from myself. Mm-hmm. And I guess there's a difference between doing that and like not beating yourself up and not getting down on yourself. And I paraphrased that, so I don't know if it had the same impact, but like when they told me that, it hit me so hard. I was like, I can expect a lot without beating myself up for not being there yet, or every day doing something to get myself there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, this summer for me has been all about letting go of perfection. I keep saying I'm a recovering perfectionist because it's not a good thing to be a perfectionist. It's a lot of fear and anxiety involved in it.
Yeah.
And I feel like I spent most of our last half of second year seeking perfection and never getting it and beating myself up like right after class and drinking a lot after our class.
Definitely a lot of drinking.
Yeah.
Drinking, smoking.
Yeah. But, and it's also hard because I don't know if you felt this way, but if you're in a majority white space, I put myself to an even higher standard because I think I need to try even harder than I already try. But I don't know if that's just a me thing. I grew up in Riverside, California, which was super not diverse. So I have always that trauma in me.
Yeah, that's interesting. I definitely know a lot of people who have that same feeling. It happens to me semi-rarely. It definitely happens to me with older white people, I think, that I feel that need to represent my culture and kind of show that exactly we're not stereotypes. But on a day-to-day basis, I'd say, not that I'm oblivious to it, but I guess I have the benefit of not kind of being consumed by it. Mm-hmm. But I also grew up in Massachusetts in a very liberal area. Yeah. And so I don't think I realized that. Like, I don't remember the time that I realized I was different.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I still feel different. I still feel that some people look at me differently.
Yeah.
But I don't walk around being like, I'm different. I'm in a white world. I'm in a whatever. I don't
Wow.
know.
That's lucky.
I
want to feel
think
that.
it is, right?
No, it is. Because I walk around the world feeling, and like part of this podcast was born out of that too, of feeling like, oh, I don't belong in this country. I'm reminded a lot of the times from the things that are said to me and like how I exist in a space that I don't really belong. And like, yeah, I feel like this podcast was like almost like a therapy and also a big like, fuck you. Of course I do.
Yeah.
Like, of course, like people like me have been in this country for a long ass time. It's not just white people.
Of course. I don't know. I guess I chalk it up to more so of that person's ignorance rather than like that's the truth of society or the world.
Yeah. Oh, I need to think like that more. I don't think like that.
It's a hit and miss. Some days I'm in your same shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like ever since the election, I've just been in a very like, I'm against all of you all the time. Don't fucking talk to me.
It's tough. I think New York is one of the better places to be, actually.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of not feeling like you're surrounded by these people who are emboldened by the new racism or homophobia, xenophobia. I think New York's, it's been very unaffected by that. I've met one person who surprised me. One person who all right, quick story. So I was at work. I've known this guy for like 2 years. He's probably in his 50s, 50-year-old white guy. It's like during the second debate, Donald Trump's talking about his goals for America. And he says something that he wants to bring back stop and frisk. And stop and frisk was like outlawed and it was ruled because it was unfavorable to black people. They were being stopped way more frequently. And so I brought that up at lunch the next day and I was like, yo, this is crazy. This guy wants to bring back stop and frisk. And this white guy who I'd known for 2 years, who I thought was normal, who I thought was cool, sat with him at lunch, talked. He was like, yeah, they should. And I was like, they target black people. What do you mean? And he was like, well, if they stopped sagging their pants and wearing hoodies, they'd have nothing to worry about. And it was like that moment where I was just like, if that's your mindset, I don't even want to like throw it on you that you're racist, but you're just not in tune with what's going on. Or you're just looking at it through the complete wrong lens. That the problem is that you're sagging your pants and you're wearing hoodies, not that cops see that and they say you're a criminal. And so, just speaking to the Trump era, that was a moment in my life that I was like, fuck, man, like.
It's so interesting because I feel like that has always been I always experience it so much so it's become like a stressor in my life. Like I'm always on guard because I'm always just waiting for the moment for basically someone to like betray my trust, where I'm just like, oh, I thought you were my friend, but this is how you feel about me and people that look like me or other marginalized people. Yeah. So, yeah.
And it's something that we deal with, at least I've gotten used to. And maybe this also speaks to kind of how I was saying my view kind of towards those people rather than the society. But like I went to school in New Jersey for 2 years and I had friends there who I would consider my best friends. And they would literally, me and my best friend, who's another black kid, went to school together and we had a bunch of white friends down there. And some of them would say stuff to us like, you're not really black. You're not actually black. Like,
yikes.
Because we didn't talk ghetto and sag our pants and say the N-word left and right. They're like, you're not really black.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's your idea of, if you're not doing that, that's what black means to them. And if you're not doing that, well, you're not black.
What's weird is I didn't experience that until college. Like, I definitely, growing up in Riverside, there were, like, just a lot of blatant racism. Just, like, a lot of, like, go back to China and you don't belong here. Just shit like that. Where I'm better with that than I am with like the microaggressions that like white liberals sort of perpetuate in the Northeast or, you know, other places, but mostly the Northeast because that's my frame of reference. Yeah, so in college there were like a lot of people, Asians included, who would be like, you're not really Asian. Like you, or like I would try, so here's another thing. I'd go on dates with other Asian guys because I like Asian guys too.
Sorry.
And they would say things like, oh, you're just really white. Like in the middle of our like nice date. I thought it was a nice time, but it's never a nice time. I'm just like, oh, you're really white. And a lot of my white friends would also say like, well, you're not really Asian. Yeah. You're like a cool Asian. And I don't know what that means. I'm just like, because when I look in the mirror, I'm super Asian and I like being Asian, but you're telling me that like being white is like what cool is. So yeah, I don't know. That was really depressing.
Was it?
Yeah, to like start talking about, but it's the truth.
It's the truth. Fuck this. It's a whole other topic I won't go into, but it's so interesting that you just brought it up about kind of like white liberals. Mm-hmm. And how apparently they're not as... I just think it's a tricky subject to me because I think we wouldn't be where we are today without white liberals. If it's my... I wish they could see the face you made. You're like, but just like, I don't know. My mind just goes back to stuff like Martin Luther King's march in, like, I think it was Birmingham. Was it Birmingham, Alabama? And just this whole civil rights movement. I think if there weren't these white liberals that got involved, then it might not have... I mean, the story that I'm going to cover today, we'll see where it took white people to get involved for people to start paying attention. But I've also listened to many Malcolm X interviews, and he breaks down white liberalism and how there's a certain agenda behind that that's not as, you know, it's not as straightforward as we think it is.
Yeah, well, that sounds like the perfect segue into what you're going to talk about today. I'd love to hear what you've learned. So, what's your topic today? Who are you focusing on? Anyone in particular, or is it a general broad topic?
I will be speaking about the Osage Indian tribe. We're just going to call them Indian for right now because that's how they are referred to, unfortunately. Okay. We all know that term's out of style. Yeah. Native American. Yeah. But yes, I'll be talking about the Osage Indian tribe, and I will be focusing on one member in particular a little bit later on to kind of just give a little bit more of a micro story into what happened. But the Osage Indian tribe... Oh, and I also have to give a shout out. My main source was this guy named David Grand. He wrote Killers of the Flower Moon. So a lot of my research was from him, but as well from other sources. But the Osage Indian tribe's a tribe out in Oklahoma, northeast Oklahoma. They're still around today. A lot of people don't know about them. If they do know about them, it's because they've heard about these mysterious string of murders. It's a murder mystery.
I love murder mysteries.
Yes. So there's this tribe, not a very large tribe. I want to say it's around 2,000 members at the time, or in the 1920s. And between 1921 and 1925, 60 members of their tribe were murdered. And why I think this is so interesting is because I think most people's reaction is like, yeah, we know that Native Americans were murdered left and right in America. But during this time, the 1920s, where, you know, we had Great Gatsby, we had Rockefeller, we had Carnegie, all these big names. This tribe of Indians, Native Americans, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna keep doing that. I'm sticking to Indians just because that's what they used at the time. These Indians were per capita the wealthiest group of people in the world.
Oh my God.
Which is unbelievable because I didn't know about this.
Yeah.
And I don't think you ever think about Native Americans being the wealthiest people in the world. So to go back a little bit, in the 17th century, they controlled pretty much all of Middle America, from like Kansas all the way out to Colorado. And they controlled the fur trade and the horse trade, which was the biggest commodities at the time. So when European settlers came over to the United States, they already showed up to this very well-established community. And so the early European settlers started working with them because they were such a strong force throughout the country. So much so that in 1803, the delegation of chiefs from the Osage Tribe were invited to the White House to meet Thomas Jefferson.
Who we hate.
Who we hate. And Thomas Jefferson, part of the reason why we hate him, he assured the Osage Tribe, he said, look, if you help us with your navigation skills, with all your knowledge of how to cultivate and farm and all these different things, we will reward you and we'll make sure that you're, included in our expansion of this new nation. Of course, didn't happen.
No, it didn't happen. I was shaking my head the entire time, like, don't trust them, please.
Yeah. In hindsight, they shouldn't have done that. But they did. They were invited to meet Thomas Jefferson. They went and they did it. And they agreed to help out his early expansion efforts throughout the nation. And over the next 2 or 3 decades, they ended up losing about 100 million acres of their land. And they ended up resettling in the 1860s, about 60 years later, in Kansas. And a small lot of Kansas, again, their territory had gone from basically all of Middle America to this small part of the state. And they started to set up shop there. They started to do some farming, their hunting. And once again, European settlers came down. They saw their land. They saw it was fertile. They had rivers for moving different commodities. And they started running them off their land once again. And so the Osage tribe was forced to leave, and they settled on new territory. Now, interesting little small tidbit here. When they were in Kansas, they were on this lot of land. And I'd actually never read the book, I don't think, Little House on the Prairie.
I read it in elementary school, and I don't remember anything from it.
I think it was probably required reading, right?
Yeah, I feel like it was. And I was just like, I don't really care about these people.
Yeah.
Cares?
I don't remember anything from it either.
I don't remember anything.
But apparently the family, I'm blanking on the girl's, Laura Ingalls Wilder. She's the author. She was a little girl at the time. And there's actually a passage in the book, Little House on the Prairie, where when Laura's a little girl, she asks her mom, she says, why did we come to this land? And the mom says pretty much, I don't know, I hate it. I hate Indians. I hate Native Americans. I just hate them. And the little daughter was like, okay, well, if you hate them so much, why are we here? And her father told her, he said, because, dear, we're here because the government is going to force these Indians to leave soon. And when they leave, we're going to have the first claim to the land. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow.
Yes.
Now I know why I didn't like that book.
There you go.
Propaganda.
They knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
So the Osage tribe, after being run off this 100 million acres of land and then being run off of their land in Kansas, and let me say, they were run off. They were given a small fee. They're basically forced to sell their land, quote unquote, sell their land. So they got a little bit of money from it. And one of the Osage leaders was fed up with this. And he was like, we need to go somewhere where the land is not fertile, where there's not good hunting ground, where there's no rivers for moving and shipping and trading. Basically the worst place that you can find, so that these European settlers would stop trying to take our land. That was their strategy. And so what they did is they found this small plot of land in northeast Oklahoma. And it was exactly that. The fertile was rocky. You couldn't really farm. There was no good hunting areas. And they were like, this is perfect. No one's going to come. No one's going to take it. And that's where they ended up resettling. And then in 1906, the United States started to, again, want to expand the country and really make it a little bit more formal and make states a little bit more formal. And so they started to force these Native Americans to onto reservations so that they could kind of really make Oklahoma its own state. And so they started doing this with all the different tribes in the area, and then they started doing this with the Osage tribe. Now, the Osage tribe still had some notoriety to them, and they had a little bit of money from their selling their land in Kansas. And they were also the last tribe to be put on a reservation. So they had a little bit of negotiating space. I don't know who. I don't know what made them think this. There's no real evidence towards it. But in the negotiations of being put into one of their reservations, there was a tribal member, a tribal leader, who in the agreement said, there's a clause in the agreement that said, we maintain all subsurface mineral rights to our territory. Again, I don't know who the hell, the first time I read that was the first time I ever heard of that.
Yeah,
So
never heard of this.
it was crazy. And so each Osage member was granted a head right. And a head right essentially means you have you own a portion of those minerals. And kind of like so the Osage tribe owns all of them, and then each Osage member got like a percentage, an even percentage. Yeah. And then about 10 years later of living on this Oklahoma rocky ground where no one cared where they were, someone discovered that there are large deposits of oil.
Oh my God.
Underneath this land. And this was boom, right when the oil rush hit.
Yeah.
And so Oklahoma, Osage territory, was one of the first big oil strikes. And you had these guys that ran the industry, like J.P. Getty, the Phillips brothers, Harry Sinclair, these like names that are iconic with America. They all rushed out to this big oil rush. Mm-hmm. But the head rights,
yeah,
they were very specific. You could only be a member of the Osage tribe, and these head rights could not be sold. You could not buy them, and they could only be passed along through like generation to generation. That's the only way that you could get it. And so they just had this almost monopoly on the oil that was being taken out of that area. And, during this big rush, people were paying a lot of money. And essentially they would buy a lease for the land. And the leases could go for, back then, like for 160 acres, $2 million, which at this day and age is about $400 million. It's insane.
Yeah.
A lot of fucking money.
Yeah.
A lot. And it started coming in really fast, and the Osage tribe became rich very, very, very fast. Rich as in like they had owned 7-8 cars. They lived in mansions. They used to go on elaborate trips to Europe and these exotic trips all over the world. Their kids went to private school.
And what year was this?
This was in 1920. In 1923 is when they hit $400 million in that year. But it was in the 1920s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like they were basically living like Gatsby.
They were
fictional,
living,
but like the real life Gatsby.
The real life Gatsby. Absolutely. They had mansions. They had chauffeurs. They had a lot of white servants.
Damn, that's awesome.
It is awesome. It is pretty awesome. However, the United States did not think that was awesome.
Of course not.
The United States government saw this as like public enemy number one. They're like, what the fuck are we gonna do with these really rich Indians? They can't have white servants. This is crazy. And so what the fuck did they do?
What the fuck did they do? What do they always do?
What do they always do? So Congress used to hold these meetings, and they weren't private meetings. They weren't quiet. These were public meetings talking about what are we going to do about this quote unquote problem. And so Congress ended up passing legislation, and it required each Osage member to have what was called a white guardian to oversee their finances. And these finances went from what's your next investment in terms of like, can you buy another oil field, or can you go out and can you buy another car? Like, they managed their money. And these guardians were nothing special. These guardians were not trained, finance investors, whatever. They were usually just local white businessmen who were just convenient in the area, might have had a background in shop ownership or who knows, but they were just considered the white guardians. Of course, there was corruption. They figured out ways to swindle money out of them, bribery, all that fun stuff.
Yes. So basically, most of colonial history.
Colonial history and a nice little bow tie. Yeah. So also around this time, right, it's starting to build up. You have these Osage Tribe Indian members getting filthy rich. You have the U.S. government kind of trying to figure out like how to, if not stop them, how to get a piece of it, how to control it. And so it's all kind of building up into this, I don't know, very chaotic time. Mm-hmm. And that's when the string of murders started to happen.
Oh my God.
And so this is kind of, again, where I'm going to talk about a particular person. I think it represents, it'll be a good representation of how these murders were carried out, how personal they were, and how kind of just bold and profound they were. So the person I'm going to focus on is this woman named Molly Burkhart. Mm-hmm. And Molly Burkhart was born in the 1886 in the traditional Osage family, like in the traditional housing. They might have still been in Kansas at the time. I don't know. They might have been Oklahoma. But she grew up with her family until she was 7, until the United States government basically took her from her home and put her in a Catholic boarding school. Not pretty, but she learned to read and write, speak English. And by the time she returned home, her family had grown pretty rich from this oil boom. And so she grew up in a pretty affluent home. Her family employed a white settler from Texas to be the chauffeur for the family. His name was Ernest Burkhart, and he would end up going on to marry Molly Burkhart.
Oh, so what was Molly's name before becoming a Burkhart?
I actually couldn't find that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but a lot of them did have by that time like Molly. Where did that name come from? I'm sure her name wasn't Molly, but they didn't give any name beforehand.
Yeah.
Of what that was.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by that too.
Yeah.
Molly, and then so Molly, she had a mother named Lizzie, a sister named Anna, and another sister named Rita.
That's kind of like how I hated my name for the longest time, because it's Sandie. It's the whitest thing I've ever heard in my life. And I hated it forever, but now I'm like, I kind of grew into it.
Yeah. I was thinking about that the other day with my name. Weird. Yeah. I grew into it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they all have these very white names. So Molly was I don't know if she's a well-known figure in the community, but she was popular. She had a lot of friends, and she would host a lot of parties. And so one night she was hosting a party, and her older sister Anna came over, and everyone's having a great time. Anna left, and she was not seen for 2 weeks. And in a very small, tight-knit community back in the 1920s, that didn't happen. Like, people didn't just disappear. You saw everyone every day at the grocery store, at church, at just walking the streets, whatever. So they just sent out this big search squad for her with the family, with her friends. And 2 weeks later, they found her body. And Anna's body. the older sister. She was found in a little ravine. She'd been shot in the back of the head, and her body was pretty much like decomposing.
Oh my God.
And so Molly lost her older sister. They were kind of scrambling. They didn't know what to do. It was one of the first murders kind of in this time period. And then over the next several days, her mother, Lizzie, started to get very, very, very ill. Weird illnesses, not like your typical fever or whatever, but she was just very sick. And I think over about a month's period, she ended up dying. And it was found out that she had been poisoned.
Oh my God.
Yes. So Molly, within about 2 months, lost her older sister and her mother. And news got out. She told her little sister Rita, who'd been living in the countryside for a while. Rita was married to another white man. And they had a maid also who was an 18-year-old white woman. Rita, hearing about this, about her mother and her sister and the rest of these kind of murders that were starting to happen, she got very scared. And she was like, I need to get back close to my family. I need to get out of this countryside. I need to be like, where it's a little bit safer. So her and her husband move in. They move about 2 or 3 houses down from Molly. They're there for a couple of months. And one night, in the middle of the night, Molly wakes up to this gigantic, deafening explosion. She walks to her window. She looks outside. 2 houses down, she sees her little sister's, Rita's house, up in flames.
Jesus.
Someone had bombed the entire house.
How do they bomb it? Wait, this is 1920s still?
1920s. I don't know what explosives they used in particular.
Wait, there's like dynamites and I don't know. I'm like, I don't know how my worldview is right now. It's very warped. I'm like, how are there bombs?
Bombs in the 1920s, there were bombs.
There were definitely bombs.
Yeah. I don't know the specifics.
It's okay. I just didn't know bombs were invented because I don't have a reference to military weapons at the time.
I was going to actually, okay, edit this out if I'm wrong because I'm going to sound really dumb. But isn't that after 1920s, after World War I, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay,
but
so...
Did they have grenades?
Yeah, we should have had bombs by 1920. I mean, but yeah.
Damn, I have no idea. I know dynamites were a thing, probably.
We should have, right? Because we would have been expanded far enough west that dynamite to build the Transcontinental Railroad.
Yes, by the Chinese.
Another topic.
Fun.
So the house blew up. The house exploded. And it killed everyone inside. It killed her sister Rita, it killed her husband, it killed their 18-year-old white maid who also had 2 children of her own. So these murders were going on, and Molly was getting as much support as she could. Back in the 1920s, you didn't really have like a strong police force. Actually, the popular thing to do would be to hire these people called a private eye. If you think about old movies, there's always like a private detective, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Shady guy, like in a trench coat, smoking a cigar.
Yeah.
So like, she hired, that's what was like the main detective back then. The problem was a lot of these guys were corrupt. They had criminal records of their own, and they just weren't reliable. And so not much was happening when they were trying to investigate these themselves. There were, going back to what we were talking about earlier, there were some decent white folks that tried to get involved and tried to help. One of them was an attorney. The attorney was very aware of the danger of what he was doing. And he even told his wife, he said, look, I think she was in a different part of Oklahoma or something. And he told her, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm investigating these murders. If something happens to me, I have this secret location set aside that has all the evidence that I've been building up. And I need you to go there and get it in case something happens. So, of course, he was found dead at some period. He'd been thrown off a moving train.
What? I was really rooting for him. I was like, come on, guy.
Yeah, I was rooting for him too.
Oh, fuck.
He was found dead, thrown off a speeding train. When his wife got word that he was dead, she went to the secret hiding spot that he told her to. And it turned out that someone else had gotten there first. They had cleaned out all the evidence, and they'd also taken all the money that he'd left for his wife and his 10 children. There's another person, another oilman, who was on the side of the Osage. He was a little bit more bold. He could pull some weight. He lived in Oklahoma, but he went to Washington, D.C. to try and get some federal support to see if someone would open an investigation. He arrived in Washington, D.C. The day that he was going to I don't remember exactly where he was going, but he had a meeting and he was leaving his hotel room. He never arrived at the meeting. He was found, I think, the next day somewhere in Maryland. His head was wrapped in a burlap sack, had been beaten in, and he was stabbed more than 20 times.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. These people were playing no games were these people playing.
Yeah. This is insane.
Yes. Yeah. And as tragic as that moment was, the silver lining was that it was a white man murdered in Washington, D.C., and the Washington Post actually decided to write an article about it. And the Washington Post, the title of the article was Conspiracy to Kill Rich Indian. And so that moment when it was posted in the Washington Post and there was a final push from the Osage tribal members is what finally got some recognition around these murders and this story that was going on. And so there was a small branch of the judicial system at the time. It was very new. It was called the Bureau Investigation. It would later become what we now know as the FBI.
Wow. What?
Yes. But it by no means is what we think about today.
Yeah.
Back then, the FBI was very small. They had very, very little jurisdiction. They were not allowed to carry guns, and they weren't even allowed to make arrests. So they would have to do a lot of research to find a criminal. Then they'd have to actually go to the local authority, convince the local authority they had enough evidence against them, and the local authority would have to go out and arrest the person.
Wow.
So it was just roadblocks for this department. However, this department was led by a very young, eager, determined man who wanted to make this bureau a big federal bureau. We know him as J. Edgar Hoover. And so J. Edgar Hoover ended up making this Osage mystery of murders one of the big first cases for the FBI. So what Hoover did, he started to recruit a whole bunch of different detectives, but he kind of had to do it in a tricky way because he understood the danger of what was going on in this county. And he was like, I can't just send in these big old-fashioned detectives to start looking around. So he started recruiting these guys from across the country who were pretty distinguished, but they ended up being a 2-year undercover operation into this Osage tribe and really infiltrating this community to figure out what's going on. And someone who they ended up kind of trusting for information ended up being this man named William Hale. William Hale was a white settler who'd come from Texas when the oil boom hit Oklahoma. He was seen as a very pro-Osage tribe person. He actually had a nickname, the King of Osage Hills, and he was seen as one of their great protectors. And what the FBI ended up discovering at the end of their investigation was this man, William Hale, who just, I guess you could say by coincidence, was the uncle of Ernest Burkhardt, Molly Burkhardt's uncle. He was a businessman and a mastermind, and he came up with a very, very long-term calculated plan of how to take these head rights from the Osage tribe. And what he did was he instructed Ernest Burkhardt and 4 other of his nephews to come up from Texas, become members of the community, become well known, become desired men, and to marry Osage women. And that's exactly what they did. Ernest Burkhart ended up marrying Molly Burkhart. His 4 other nephews ended up marrying other Osage Tribe members. And over about 15 years, they orchestrated the murders of these Osage families. And you have to remember, like, these, if you're married to, like, let's say Molly Burkhart, I don't think it's as easy as you kill her and then it goes to you. Like, it probably goes to like her son or her nephew, which means like they have to be killed before it goes to you. And so that was like the plan. Molly Burkhart and Ernest Burkhart had 2 kids. So I don't know. It didn't go details. I don't think the kids were not murdered. Stay. Let's not go that far. But that was the plan. And they ended up murdering off many, many family members. And they were pretty successful of getting these head rights transferred over to these white settlers. I just got a Tinder match.
In the climax of this story, Ezra just got matched on Tinder, guys.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. So when the FBI discovered this, it took a little while, but finally, in 1926, William Hale, Ernest Burkhart, and the 4 nephews were all sentenced to life in prison.
Yes.
Cheer, cheer, except not cheer, cheer, because they were later released on parole.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, I don't know how the fuck that happens. So that was, I mean, really kind of what happened to a lot of families. Molly Burkhart, she ended up in 1934, about almost 8 years after all this with her family went down, that she found out her husband, who was trying to murder her. When the FBI was doing their investigation, they found out that Molly Burkhart had trace amounts of poison in her as well. So she was in the process of being poisoned when they caught her husband and her, whoever fucking her uncle. I don't know what that guy would be called. Yeah, but finally, in 1934, 10 years later, after I guess you could say she lived a relatively normal life. Obviously, she got rid of that drama. I think drama is an understatement.
Yeah, it's like a huge understatement. She got rid of all that. She got rid of the toxic men in her life.
Yeah. She moved past the drama. And 1934, she was given permission by the U.S. government to control her own fortune, finally. And she was also recognized as a citizen of the United States.
Yes, Molly.
Good shit. 3 years later, June 16th, 1937.
That's my birthday.
June 16th?
Yeah.
Oh,
fuck.
June 16th, 1937, Molly Burkhart. I've been drinking wine. Molly Burkhart passed away.
Oh, fuck.
From unrelated causes.
Okay, good.
And her entire estate was given to her children.
Good.
So, happy story about that.
Yes.
But absolutely, that was a highlight into one of the families affected, but that was just what happened in that time period.
That's fucking insane.
Fucked up. And the crazy part is, okay, so the oil boom stopped around in the 1940s. Mm-hmm. So the town wasn't as bustling as it was before, but oil still runs.
Yeah.
Oil still runs through there. And to this day, if you're an Osage Tribe member, you still receive royalties from the oil that's coming out of that area. It's a little fucked up how they determine how you're Osage. Like, it goes off of some 1906 treaty or agreement, and it goes off of your blood percentage. And obviously generation after generation, there's been more mixing. So like, I don't even know. I don't even know how they calculate it. But like, the percentage of what your blood is how you present the royalties that you get.
Yeah.
And there's been court cases kind of going back and forth of letting the Osage tribe has been fighting to govern themselves.
Yeah.
Because they haven't been allowed to. And literally as recent as 2004, George Bush signed into law an act that allowed the Osage tribe to govern themselves.
Oh, nice.
And so they did that. I think it was a rocky period of kind of learning how to do that, especially after the history of what happened. There's a lot of disagreement on how they should govern themselves. They currently now do have their own system of government, a democratic one. It's very similar to us, 3 branches of government. But they still exist out in northeast Oklahoma. Yeah.
I had no idea.
Crazy, right?
Yeah, because all the stories I've learned is just like, oh, they all Native Americans are on reservations and they have casinos, and that's it.
That's
basically
what we're taught.
Yeah, or there's like a plethora of problems within the reservations, like lack of education, lack of resources, and all the things that Americans have done to fuck them over, basically.
Absolutely. I actually left it out. It's kind of what you just said about these problems. There's an article that I read. There's a little excerpt. It's kind of out of context, but I want to read it. It says, in 2006, it has defined membership. This is for the Osage tribe. Defined membership based on a person's lineal descent from a member listed on the Osage rolls at the time of the Osage Allotment Act in 1906. A minimum blood quantum's not required, but as the Bureau of Indian Affairs restricts federal education scholarships to persons who have 25% more blood quantum in one tribe. So the Osage Nation tries to support higher education of its own students. I don't know if I'm reading that wrong, but I read that as they kind of have the Bureau of Indian Affairs, I think, is a United States government branch. It's not like
I have no idea.
I have no idea. I probably should have researched that because I don't want to give wrong information. But it's saying that it restricts federal scholarships if you have 25% more Indian blood, the reason why I left that out until now is like a side note is because I feel that I have such a hard time believing that. It might be true, but like if still today, if they're saying if you have 25% more of some Indian tribe blood, you're not allowed like a scholarship, an education scholarship, that would be fucking nuts.
Yeah, I thought that all Native Americans can go to university for free. Am I making that up?
I don't know.
I feel like that was what was in my head.
Well, I hope you're right. And that sounds, I don't know, maybe I'm giving United States benefit of the doubt, but I'm like, that sounds right.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Like, it sounds fucked up to say
that you can't get scholarship. But I thought it's free. Well, I'm gonna look that up later, and then I'll
look that up.
Put it on Twitter. The real answer.
So I don't have Twitter, so you gotta.
I'll put it on Instagram.
There you go.
Yeah, I'll say all this later. But that story was fucking crazy and incredible. The entire time, you guys cannot see my face, but my face was just in shock the entire time. Because I love a good murder story, but I had no idea that these murders happened. Yeah. And so calculated. Like, I was playing it like a movie in my head of, like, when they discover everything. You know how there's, like, a flashback of, like, a montage of all the little plans they've done? That's fucked up. All for money.
All for money. I don't know, man. I like to think about how evil people can be. I don't know if I'd like to think about how evil people, but like it's weird to think about. And to think about, I can't picture being this guy Ernest. I can't picture my uncle calling me saying, "Come here and marry this woman and have kids so that you can then murder them so that we can get their money." Like
like what kind of conference? I would just be like, no, that's insane.
It's literally insane. So I can't imagine someone being told that. But I also I think just saying it's insane is like dismissive, right? And I'm like, fuck that. You can't just say this guy's insane. Like, I want to know what the fuck he was thinking.
And it's all for the money.
It's all for the money.
People do things for money. Like, I don't know. That's why, like, I'm, like, almost afraid of having a lot of money because I don't want someone to murder me for it, you know?
Give it to me if you make a lot. I'm not afraid of having money.
You're not afraid? I think about that. I think about like fame and money a lot and how I'm like afraid of both because I don't want people to murder me or stalk me.
I'm afraid of fame for sure.
Yeah.
Even though like I'm like intrigued by it, I'm definitely afraid of it.
Like I feel bad for Justin Bieber. Like I'm just like
he can't do shit.
Yeah.
R.I.P. Mac Miller.
Oh, that's right. That's what I mean.
He's someone who, yeah, man, like you can't go anywhere without now. Like he just sees his girlfriend getting engaged, posted up everywhere. People probably want to know what he thinks. Like you can't escape it. That's what's fucking scary to me.
Yeah, even though that's like a totally personal thing, and it's just like, I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't go to the fucking Rite Aid without seeing an article saying she's so much happier now, or da-da-da-da-da, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think it's also unfair to, like, say it's all because of Ariana.
You're right.
Either.
I mean,
there's, like, we've all had our hearts broken before, and, you know.
More or less.
Right.
No, but you're absolutely right.
I think it's unfair to, like, put that on the woman, basically. Yeah. Put, like, all of your mental health problems on, like, your significant other.
True.
Any capacity.
Well, isn't that the mental health? It's not us putting it on her. She had nothing to do with it. But
she had nothing to do with it.
That's kind of his own mental issue is putting too much of his self-worth into his relationship, right?
Oh, I know nothing about that. I just saw that he passed, overdosed. I did not know. I'm making shit up. I just assume it is like other things because it's like did you ever watch Avicii's documentary?
No.
I didn't even love his music that much, but it made me feel like, damn, the industry is fucked up. The things that they do to their artists is just really fucked up. And it came out like a few months before he overdosed as well. So it kind of like, it almost explained why he would be going down that path.
What's it on? Netflix?
No, I think you can find it elsewhere. I think I watched it on Amazon Prime. I may be wrong.
I want to watch the Robin Williams documentary.
Yeah, that might hurt me too.
Depression's crazy, man.
Depression's fucked up.
It's fucked up too because you look at guys like him and also Anthony Bourdain when that happened. Those are two people that I'm just like, they wouldn't, like, suicide doesn't cross their mind.
I mean, yeah, it's just it's like, it's one of those things where like both fame and money cannot cure what is already ailing you. And I think a lot of people, at least in my perspective, a lot of people chase both fame and money to heal themselves. Mm-hmm. And it only further amplifies like whatever not problems. I don't want to say problems, but it further is whatever is going on in you because once you get all of that and you're still not happy or content, then that's when you're like, oh fuck, like then what is it? And then what do I have to live for?
Right.
And that's something I think that's another reason why I'm afraid of both fame and money is then I'll have that moment of like, oh fuck.
You're like, fuck, this doesn't make me happy.
Yeah. On top of almost being murdered by other people. Like, I don't want people to come murder me. The murder part. On top of someone marrying me just to murder me.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Fuck fame.
Fuck fame. But yeah. That's an insane story. I can't stop thinking about it.
Insane.
How did Molly feel? I mean, Molly probably was devastated.
I'm sure she was. I mean, to figure out that your husband probably fucking 2 months before you even met him had this plan in his head, you know what I mean? Like you were saying, like you think about all those moments, like she probably thought about all these different, every like happy moment they had together. And she's like, was he happy or was this part of the plan?
Yeah. How can you act for that long? How can you just like act for that long?
Again, that goes back right into what exactly. What the fuck were you thinking?
Yeah.
What were you, was it worth it? That's the other question. Is it worth it to marry and have kids for, I guess I guess there's enough people out there who actually still fucking do that.
Yeah. So wait, so they got out on parole, and then what do they do with their lives?
I don't know. I like to think they were pretty old when they got out.
Yeah.
But no, I don't. I wish I had that information. I don't know. Like, as much as that's fucked up, I also think it's equally fucked up that no one's heard this story.
Yeah, I've never heard of this.
Like, because even we talk about that time period, and we talk about the Gatsbys, about that time period of old money meeting new money.
Yeah.
We're already talking about the time period. We're talking about money.
Yeah.
Why is no one talking about the wealthiest people in the world are also like some of the most oppressed people in the world, and it's happening right in America?
Yeah.
That's where I'm like, someone made a calculated effort to leave this story out of American history.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's like there should be more. There should be a movie about this. Like, this would be a badass film, I think, because it's like about money, intrigue, murder, and a little bit of romance. I mean, fucked up romance, but but yeah, I think that's why I'm so I guess passionate about representation in media, because I do think that media is very calculated, and I think there is like a move to. It's this thing I read years ago. It was called symbolic annihilation. And it's a way to basically erase people of color from any sort of media or any sort of representation or any stories. And because of that, you as a person of color think you don't exist in a way. So that further erases who you are. And I do think it is like a very calculated thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because when you think about like new money and old money, like you were talking about, we think about like Titanic and all those white people on board, and also F. Scott Fitzgerald, Great Gatsby, and all those other F. Scott Fitzgerald books of like white people just having money,
right,
or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Like when I think of the 20s, in my mind, it's all white people just partying in the jazz age, even though I love the jazz age and I would have loved to have been like, one of those flapper girls or whatever. I can't think of a person of color in my head, even though I know intellectually they definitely exist. We definitely exist back then, and we're probably partying too.
That would almost be another topic I'd love to go into. Well, there's two things you touched on about, like, obviously what was going on in the 1920s with those people that we didn't see, but also because that is something that people talk about, and I believe that it is true when they talk about like people kind of debate the effects of slavery. Mm-hmm. And obviously not only just the actual people who were enslaved, but yes, being like the descendants of people that had an entire tradition and like culture ripped away from them. Because I'm a descendant of that, and I don't feel like I'm totally aware of it, or if I am aware of it, it's like, yeah, it could be affecting me in ways that I think that are normal. You know what I mean? Instead of being like, oh, I do this or that, or think this or that because of X. Instead, right now it's just like, no, that's normal. That's how. Yeah. That's what real life is.
Yeah. Do you read a lot about intergenerational trauma?
Intergenerational?
Yeah, it's like how trauma is passed down from our DNA, from like our ancestors.
Fuck no, but that sounds...
Yeah, it's fucked up. So
scary.
You should read up about it. I think about it all the time, about like how the things I react to it, I think about like, is it because my grandparents lived through war and were refugees? Like, is that like in my DNA, basically? But that's a huge topic, especially for Black Americans, because the whole community is based off of trauma, basically. So, yeah.
I already like sit and think and worry a lot about like shit like that. Yeah. I shouldn't say shit like that, but like, but yeah, no, things like, are my thoughts affected by things outside of my control? That's something that kind of scares me, I think. Mm-hmm. Not knowing if your thoughts are your own, or if your thoughts are because of something, like things like subliminal messaging.
Yeah.
Like that scares me. Am I really thinking this? Do I really like this? Do I really not like that? Or has there been an effect, kind of like what you just described happening to me. So yeah, that you just got me a little bit nervous.
Oh no, I'm sorry. But if we could highlight more stories like this, hopefully that will counteract it, because I do have the belief that it is all because of white supremacy and colonialism that we have all this like fucked up shit happening within us. Well, it's so cool that you brought in a story about Native Americans, because we never hear about them. And I think about like I think about the Native Americans all the time. I don't know how else to like put it, but yeah, I think about like all the art and the traditions and just the discoveries they had made before colonialism happened, basically before there was a mass genocide of their people. And I think about like what could have been. And whenever I go, I also hate upstate New York, but that's like the only place you can go to get out of the city really quickly.
Yeah.
But I think about upstate New York a lot, and I think about like, are there just like this is getting crazy now, but are there spirits just like lurking in these woods? I don't know. I think about that a lot.
Another
like
thing that
ghosts.
scares me.
Yeah, because you grew up in the woods. I fucking hate the woods because I feel like okay, here's a story. I stayed in a yurt a couple weeks ago. It's a month ago now.
You said in a yurt?
A yurt. And it was like, it's like glamping, but it was basically camping, and I was really pissed off the entire time.
Is glamping's glamorous camping?
Yeah, but it was like a yurt, and it was an Airbnb. It was for a friend's wedding, and it was on like 100-acre like forest land. And you know, the people who hosted this place, they were very like hippie-ish and like new agey and kind of like off the beaten path. They were like cool. They like made essential oils for a living.
Cool.
I thought about our teacher as I was there. And yeah, and it was in the middle of the woods, so it was like dark as shit. And Garrett told me that when he was going to get water, like, because the water fountain was like far away from our yurt, he felt a presence coming in on him. And Garrett's always been more affected by paranormal stuff, and I think I've blocked it out because like if I experienced it, I would die. So I just say I don't believe in it, but like when people tell me, then I kind of believe it. So he told me that, and it really freaked me out. And then we like went to eat dinner with the host or the couple that were hosting us. And Garrett said this to them, and they were like, "Oh yeah, those are the Native American spirits." And I was just like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
And they're just like, "Don't worry, they're just like watching over you, and like, you know, because this used to be like the land of like some tribe that they named, and I forgot. Sorry." And they, you know, they would have like these rituals, so you probably felt them closing in on you because they were like having one of their rituals. And it really freaked me out.
I'm with you.
That's so scary. So I think about that. I think about like what could have been if like we as an Americans did not like just kill them all, basically.
Right.
And what kind of country this would have been. Like all the spirituality involved too.
I don't think we can imagine it. It would be a world where, depending how it broke up, but it'd be a world where like we didn't have 43 presidents in a row that were white.
Yeah.
It'd be
45. Oh, you mean, and then Obama, and then now Trump.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
Right? 43? Obama's 44?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be a world where probably white men or, you know, white people weren't the majority for the, you know, last however hundreds of years they were. Yeah, it's like you can't believe it.
Yeah.
You can't believe it. But I'm with you. I don't like spirits.
You don't like them? Have you ever experienced any?
You know what movie fucked me up?
What was it?
The Sixth Sense.
Oh, yeah, that.
My parents let me see it when I was too little. Fucked me up. Like, when I say fucked me up, I mean like still today.
Oh no.
There's shit that like will like trigger something.
Oh no. Have you ever seen something that you felt like
A spirit?
Yeah.
No, I'd flip out.
Yeah, same. I would also flip out, but Garrett has a lot of times, and all of my family members have seen ghosts. they say. And I'm the only person who's just like, I have sleep paralysis, so that's when I experience like ghosts and shit. But that's like there's a scientific explanation behind it. So I stick with that explanation to not believe that, oh, there's a demon in the corner just staring at me.
Dude, you're actually, I'm not even joking, you're making me scared right now.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
I don't like...
This is bad. Okay, we're not going to
Living in New York is like, okay, because I don't get scared in New York because it's not the woods. But if you were telling me this and I was like at my home in Massachusetts, yeah.
The woods are fucked up.
There's this, I was petrified of like E.T. My biggest nightmares would be that E.T. was like walking. My woods all surrounds my house. That I would just look out my window and I just see E.T. walking towards my house.
I don't want to visit you in the woods ever. I hate the woods.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, when we stayed in the yurt, we had to walk like maybe 5 minutes to get to our yurt in the dark, and they gave us these like lanterns. And I wanted to
lantern makes it even more spooky.
Yeah, I was just like, never. I had my lantern and my iPhone flashlight at the same time, and I just had to like be like, get to the yurt, get to the fucking yurt.
They give you a musket too?
No, but I don't think they liked me. I think they could tell very quickly I was too much of a diva for the woods.
So they were like, let's fuck with her even more. Why not?
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to plug that you're working on, or anything you'd like the audience to take away? Like, what should we do? How do we solve white supremacy?
Man.
It doesn't have to be that
deep.
deep.
Do I need the answer to that?
What's some things we can take away from the Osage story?
I think... if there's one thing I think people should take away, it's seek out these kind of stories. Seek out stories of shit we haven't heard. I think it's pretty crazy to think about I'm in my late 20s, 28, that like even when we were in school, the textbooks that we read, how prejudiced they were. I haven't read what a U.S. history book looks like in 7th grade anymore. But I think just a story like this should highlight the things we weren't taught in school. And so I would just say seek these stories out and learn about how America came to be, why it is the way it is, and whether you're white or whether you are a minority, find out about that history, because that history is not only fucking interesting, but I think it gives you some perspective into how we got to where we are and even where we're going.
Yeah, that's good.
If you want to follow me on Instagram.
Yeah, plug it.
It's kind of complicated. It's walks_his_own_ pace with 2 E's. Maybe if you search Ezra Bynum, it'll pop up, hopefully.
Yeah, I'll tag you because, Now in Color is also on Instagram now. So you can follow us at Now in Color Podcast. And you can also follow us on Twitter at Now_in_color. And also on Facebook. You can find us on Facebook. And we're also now on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. So you can listen to us anywhere. Please subscribe and rate, because then more people will discover this podcast, hopefully, and learn more about history.
Do it. R.I.P. Burt Reynolds.
Yeah, R.I.P. Also Mac Miller. That's basically it.
Now in Color.
And